Welcome back. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Retail Horror Stories. Hit the like button and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That way, YouTube knows to keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. I've always thought Aldi's cart system was clever. You put a quarter in, unlock a cart, and when you bring it back, you get the coin again. Simple. No stray carts all over the lot. No employees chasing them down. For years, it was routine for me. Quarter in, cart out, groceries bagged, cart returned, quarter back. Easy, but one quarter kept coming back when it shouldn't have. It started about a year ago. I keep a little pile of quarters in my console just for Aldi. One afternoon, I grabbed one that looked odd. The surface was scratched in a way I hadn't seen before, and someone had carved a single letter into it. A crooked A like it had been done with a razor blade. The edges were rough under my thumb. Didn't think much of it. People deface coins all the time. I slipped it into the cart chain, shopped as usual, and went home. When I unloaded the groceries, the quarter I'd gotten back wasn't the carved one. It was clean, no marks at all. I figured maybe I grabbed a different coin from the pile without noticing. Except the next day when I got in my car, the carved quarter was sitting right back in my console, exactly where I always kept them. It happened again the next week. I put the carved coin in the lock, came out with a different one, and yet the next morning the carved coin was back. Always damp, like it had been sitting outside overnight. After the third or fourth time, I taped it to my fridge with masking tape just to prove I wasn't imagining things. When I got home from work that evening, the tape was still there, but the coin was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint metallic rattling, like shopping carts clanging together outside my apartment. I live on the third floor, no carts anywhere nearby. The next afternoon, I went to Aldi again. As I walked toward the store, I saw a cart sitting alone, already unlocked. Sitting in the child seat was a quarter, the same carved one, wet again. My stomach dropped. I didn't touch it. I left it there, grabbed another cart and shopped. But as I checked out, I noticed the girl at the register staring at me. Not in a rude way, but with a strange familiarity. She pointed at my cart and said, "You've been here before, right? You always take the quarter." I didn't answer, just nodded awkwardly and bagged my things. That night, I dreamed of thunder, rain hammering metal, shopping carts lined up outside, vibrating under a black sky. A hand, thin, burned, charred, shoving a coin into the lock. Lightning split the lot, and the cart runner collapsed, electricity flashing through the chain. The coin sizzled in the lock, glowing white-hot before vanishing. I woke up, gasping, sweat-soaked, and my alarm clock flashing from a power surge. When I went into the kitchen for water, the carved quarter was sitting dead center on the counter. Frost rimmed the edge, cold enough that when I touched it, it burned my finger. I started digging for answers. That Aldi store had a little plaque near the cart corral. I'd seen it 1,000 times and never read it, but now I did. It was a memorial to a young employee who'd been killed during a storm more than a decade ago. Lightning struck while he was pushing carts in the lot. The plaque didn't mention his name, just the store number, but scratched faintly in the metal base, almost invisible, was the same crooked A carved into the coin. I tried to get rid of it, dropped it in a storm drain, tossed it in the trash, even left it on a different store's corral across town. It didn't matter. By morning, it would be back in my console, wet and freezing cold. One night after shopping, I finally gave in and used it again, slipped it into the lock, pushed my cart through the sliding doors, and went about my trip. The whole time I felt like someone was watching me. The lights above aisle 3 flickered in rhythm with my steps. In frozen foods, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. Except I wasn't moving right. My reflection pushed the cart a half second before I did. I nearly left the cart full and ran. But something in me, call it morbid curiosity, wanted to see what would happen if I just returned it normally. When I wheeled the cart back, I pressed the release button and pulled the chain. My hand recoiled. The quarter in the slot was glowing faintly, red around the carved groove. When it dropped into my palm, it burned, just like in my dream. The next flash of lightning outside knocked the power out in the whole store. The automatic doors slammed shut, and for a moment the only sound was carts clanging together in the darkness. Dozens of them, rolling, even though the floor was level. In the flashes of lightning outside, I swore I saw shapes moving between them. A figure pushing carts into neat lines. The same motion again and again. When the power came back, the carts were stacked perfectly, every chain locked. And the carved quarter was back in my palm, ice cold now, dripping wet. I haven't been able to shop without it since. Every time I try to leave it behind, something goes wrong. My car won't start, my keys vanish, or worse, the sliding doors won't unlock until I pull it from my pocket. Employees don't even ask for a quarter anymore when they see me. They just wave me through like they know I already have it. Sometimes, when the storm rolls in, I hear the carts outside rattling together even when no one is there. And if I watch closely, in the reflection of the sliding doors, I see him. A young man in a soaked uniform, still pushing, still lining them up. His eyes flash white with every lightning strike, and in his hand, always the quarter. And when he looks at me, it's like he's waiting for me to take his place. If you've ever shopped at Aldi, you know the cashiers move fast. Faster than anywhere else. They don't bag, they don't chat, they just scan. Their hands blur across the barcodes, prices beep out like machine gun fire, and before you know it, the pile of food you thought would take 10 minutes to ring up is stacked on the counter in less than 60 seconds. Most people laugh about it online, but for me, it wasn't funny. Not after what I saw. It was a Saturday evening, right before closing. I'd taken my son Leo to Aldi to grab some groceries for the week. He was 3 years old at the time, sitting in the cart seat with a juice pouch, kicking his sneakers against the metal bar, while I loaded bread, cereal, and some milk onto the belt. The cashier that night was a woman I hadn't seen before. Middle-aged, tired eyes, hair pulled back too tight. She barely looked at me when I said hello. As soon as I placed the first item on the belt, her scanner lit up red and she started moving. Fast. At first, I didn't think much of it. Aldi cashiers are always fast, but something felt different. Her hands weren't just moving quickly, they were moving too quickly, jerking in sharp, unnatural motions. Each beep sounded like it came before she even touched the barcode. I frowned down at the milk jug that had just passed. Something was wrong. The label didn't look right. The logo was the same but faded, like an old photograph. The expiration date read yesterday, not next week like it should have. I picked up the cereal box next. It was Leo's favorite, the one with the bright cartoon mascot on the front. Except the character wasn't smiling. The colors were muted, and the design looked like the older boxes I remembered from years ago, back when I was a kid. Excuse me," I started, but the cashier kept going, faster and faster. My items blurred past. Each one was wrong. The bread was in older packaging, the logo not updated. The strawberries were in a container with last week's date stamped across it. Even the receipt printer seemed to hum lower, its screen flickering in a greenish light that didn't match the normal interface. And then I noticed Leo. He'd stopped kicking. His head was tilted, eyes wide, fixed on the red glow of the scanner. His juice pouch, half empty a moment ago, was suddenly full again. The crumpled straw wrapper he'd dropped on the cart floor was gone. Even worse, the little scrape on his knee from earlier that day. It wasn't there anymore. The bandage was missing, and his skin looked freshly healed, untouched. "Stop," I said, louder this time. "Can you slow down?" The cashier froze mid-motion, her hand hovering inches from the next barcode. Her eyes flicked up to mine like she'd just woken from a trance. The scanner light shifted, pulsing orange now, not red. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just bad lighting, just my eyes playing tricks. But then the machine beeped again on its own, scanning an item she hadn't touched, a can of Aldi brand soup. The system glitched. The screen went blank for a second, then filled with static. The receipt printer spat out paper in jerks, but when I glanced at it, the numbers didn't make sense. Subtotal, 0.00. Date, pending. I stared at it, heart pounding. The word pending flickered in and out like a warning. Leo whimpered in the cart. I looked down and my stomach dropped. The cereal box he was holding wasn't the one we'd grabbed off the shelf 15 minutes ago. It was older, much older. The mascot looked wrong, drawn in a style from decades back. I remembered my mother buying the exact same box when I was small. A discontinued version Aldi hadn't sold in years. I grabbed the box from him, turning it over. The expiration date wasn't just old, it was impossible. It read 1989. The cashier didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her face pale and stiff, like she was forcing herself not to react. Then, without warning, she slammed the soup can against the scanner again. The orange light turned to a dull gray beam, colorless, barely glowing. It wasn't light, it was absence. It didn't cast shadows. It didn't even reflect off the barcodes. It just sucked the color out of everything it touched. The receipt printer went wild, spewing line after line of gibberish, dates and times scrolling backward. 2015, 2006, 1994, 1981. Each date stamped next to items I half recognized. Aldi packaging from years long gone. Leo started crying. His hair looked different. Flipped the opposite direction, like a mirror image of how it had been that morning. His little sneakers were suddenly brand new, laces tied perfectly, dirt stains gone. My hands trembled as I tried to reach for him. The cashier whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "Don't let him eat it." I looked down. Leo had another box in his lap, the discontinued cereal. His little fingers were clawing at the cardboard, trying to tear it open. I ripped it from him and shoved it back onto the counter. The moment I let go, the scanner beeped once, and the lights flickered. And just like that, everything stopped. The screen blinked back to normal. The cashier exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for minutes. My groceries sat in a neat pile, all of them in current packaging again, dates correct. Leo's scab was back on his knee, his juice pouch half empty, the bandage wrapper crumpled at his feet. I stared at the receipt in my hand. It looked normal. $42.16, time-stamped correctly, nothing out of place. Except when I flipped it over, the back wasn't blank. Scrawled in black ink were 3 words: check the date. I left the store shaking, Leo clinging to my shirt. That night, I logged into his pediatrician's online portal to confirm his appointment for the following week. But something was off. The system showed a completed visit from last year. Same doctor, same office, but with a note. Child brought cereal for comfort. Ate in lobby. The cereal listed. The discontinued one Aldi hasn't carried in decades. I shut the laptop and didn't sleep a wink. Now, every time I shop, I watch the scanner, watch the packaging, watch the dates. And once in a while, when the cashier moves too fast, faster than humanly possible, I see the orange light flicker back just for a second. And every time I leave Aldi now, I check Leo over from head to toe, because I can't shake the feeling that one day, if I'm not paying attention, the store won't just rewind my groceries. It'll rewind him too. If you shop at Aldi often enough, you know about the middle aisle. Aldi Finds, they call it. The weekly rotation of oddball products piled onto pallets, shrink wrap torn, boxes stacked in chaotic towers. It's never the same twice. One week it's air fryers and gardening tools. The next week, rain boots and children's toys. That unpredictability is what people love. You don't go looking for something there, you let it find you. I used to love wandering through that aisle. It felt like a treasure hunt, like you might stumble on something meant just for you. I didn't realize how literal that would become. It started one Thursday morning. I stopped at Aldi before work, the store just opening. The middle aisle was crowded with shoppers, carts blocking half the walkway as they clawed through fresh pallets. Employees were slicing plastic wrap, revealing stacks of boxed goods. That's when I saw it. On top of a pallet, sealed in clear tape, was a cardboard box. Written across the lid in black marker, RHEA, open last. My name, not a common one. And the way it was written, the slant of the R, the way the A hooked to the E, that was my handwriting. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it just looked similar. Before I could stop them, an employee sliced the tape and pulled the flaps open. Inside were camping mugs. Old, dented enamel mugs. My chest tightened when I saw the one on top, its rim chipped in the exact place I'd broken it on a camping trip with my dad 15 years ago. I knew that mug, I owned that mug, or I had. After my dad died, we sold those mugs in a garage sale. They'd been gone for years. Yet here they were, sitting under the fluorescent lights, priced with an Aldi tag like any other product. I picked it up, hands shaking. On the bottom, faint but unmistakable, were the initials my dad had carved with his pocket knife. R+D. I put the mug back in the box and walked out of the store. I didn't even buy groceries that morning. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. There it was, a snapshot from that garage sale. Mugs laid out on a folding table. But in the blurry background, almost out of frame, was a wooden pallet stamped faintly with the letters AL-. The photo was dated the exact week of the new Aldi shipment I'd seen that morning. I told myself it was a coincidence, my mind filling in blanks. But the next Thursday, curiosity dragged me back. I walked into the middle aisle with my heart pounding. And there it was again, another box, same black marker, same handwriting, RIA, open last. This time, inside were my dad's tools, the old wrench he'd carved his initials into, the same rust patterns, the same smell of oil and iron. I carried it around the store in a daze. At checkout, the cashier didn't scan it. She just looked me in the eye and said flatly, "Sometimes they come back." I tried to laugh, but the sound died in my throat. At home, I left the wrench on my kitchen table. The next morning, it was gone. In its place was a slip of receipt paper, 3 words scrawled across the back. "See you Thursday." Every week after that, it happened. Another box, another piece of my past, a sweater I'd lost in high school, books from my childhood, my dad's fishing hat still smelling faintly of lake water. Each time I brought something home, my apartment felt heavier, the air stale, oppressive. Some mornings I'd wake to find the mugs lined neatly on the counter, or the wrench laid out with other tools I hadn't touched. More than once, I swore I heard my dad's voice, low, muffled, like he was calling from another room. I told myself to stop, to skip just 1 week. The Thursday I stayed home, my phone buzzed after midnight. A bank alert. $12.99 charged at Aldi. I hadn't left the apartment. When I opened my door the next morning, a box sat outside. Aldi tape sealed tight. My handwriting across the lid. Inside was a photo frame. The picture inside was of me, standing in Aldi the week before, holding my dad's fishing hat, smiling faintly. But I hadn't taken that photo. The timestamp in the corner wasn't from last week, it was tomorrow's date. From that moment, the line blurred. It wasn't just about Aldi Finds anymore. Boxes began appearing outside my door without me shopping. I opened one to find my childhood stuffed animal, fur-matted, button eyes scratched. Another held my high school jacket, the one I lost senior year. Each item felt like Aldi was pulling me backward, piece by piece. The worst was the watch. It had been my dad's. I'd slipped it into his casket at the funeral. The crystal was still cracked, the band worn exactly as I remembered. I dropped it the second I recognized it. It ticked once on the floor. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw boxes stacking themselves in the middle aisle, each one marked with my name. Not mugs, not tools, not clothes. Something bigger, something waiting. I avoid the middle aisle now. Run in, grab milk and bread, get out. Never look left, never look right, but I can't escape the feeling that Aldi is still looking for me. Still digging. Because some nights when I pass the store, I hear a voice whispering from between the aisles, faint but unmistakable. My dad's voice. "Over here, Rhea." Open last. And I know one Thursday soon, the box won't hold mugs or sweaters. It'll hold him, and when it does, I won't be able to walk away. I'd shopped at Aldi for years, without incident. It's cheap, efficient, no frills. Get in, get out. But one evening, standing in a checkout lane that should have taken 2 minutes, I learned that sometimes the simplest places hide the worst things. It was a Friday night just before closing. The store was half empty, lights buzzing faintly overhead. I grabbed a few essentials, milk, bread, frozen pizza, and pushed my cart toward the front. There were only 2 lanes open. I chose the shorter one behind a man who looked unwell. At first, I thought he was just sick. His skin had a strange gray cast, like he hadn't been in the sun for months. His lips were dry and cracked, flaking as he shifted. He moved slowly, like each gesture took effort. He unloaded his cart 1 can at a time, setting them on the belt in stiff, jerky motions. The cashier gave me a tight smile, the kind you give when you're uncomfortable, but trying to stay polite. I noticed her scanning faster than usual, like she wanted to be done with him. When I looked back at the man, my stomach twisted. His gums were bleeding. Thin rivulets of dark blood dripped down his chin, splattering on the belt. The customer behind me whispered, "Don't touch him." The cashier pressed the call button for a manager, but the man suddenly collapsed forward. His body hit the conveyor with a thud. Groceries rolled onto the floor. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, voice trembling. The man groaned. It was low and guttural, a sound that vibrated in my chest. And then he moved, not the way a person should. His body bent at odd angles as he lurched upward. His jaw snapped open and shut like it was unhinged. He turned, eyes milky and clouded, and lunged toward the woman behind me. She screamed, stumbling back, but he caught her sleeve and bit down on her arm. Blood spread across the fabric in seconds. The cashier bolted from her seat. Someone shouted to call 911. I grabbed Leo, my son, who was sitting in the cart, and pulled him close. He started crying, and I hushed him as best I could, backing away. Another customer tried to help, swinging a box of cereal at the man's head. The box burst, flakes spilling across the tile. The man didn't react. He just growled and shoved forward, teeth gnashing. The automatic doors at the front opened with a hiss, and I thought help had arrived. But no one came in. The cold night air swept through, and for a split second I smelled it. Rot. Thick, wet, cloying. The smell of something long dead. We managed to drag the bitten woman toward the back of the store. Employees slammed the sliding doors shut and locked them. Someone pulled down the metal gate that closes after hours. For a moment, we thought we were safe. But the man didn't stop. He slammed against the glass, leaving bloody smears. His teeth clattered against it as he snapped his jaw. The sound of it still echoes in my head, bone clicking against bone. We called the police. 20 minutes passed. No one came. The cashier tried again, voice shaking into the receiver, but the line just crackled. When we checked the cameras at the front, the blood drained from my face. The man was still visible, pacing, groaning, slamming his hands against the doors, but his reflection in the glass didn't match. It stood perfectly still, staring back inside. The employees whispered among themselves, voices low. One swore they'd seen something like this before. Said sometimes at night after close, carts moved on their own in the lot. Said people whispered about shadows between the aisles when the lights flickered. Nobody wanted to believe it, but here it was, right in front of us. The bitten woman's breathing grew shallow. She clutched her arm, sobbing, blood soaking her clothes. I tried to keep Leo from seeing, shielding his face, but he peeked through his fingers, whispering, "Is she sick, Daddy?" I didn't know how to answer. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the man outside stopped moving. He stood still for a long minute, swaying on his feet. Then he turned and shambled toward the parking lot. His shadow reflection in the glass lingered a moment longer, its mouth slowly stretching into a grin before fading away. We waited hours before unlocking the doors. By then, the lot was empty. Not even his groceries remained. When the police finally arrived, they dismissed the whole thing. Said maybe the man had a seizure. Said stress and panic made people exaggerate. They didn't even file a report about the bite. But I can't forget the look in his eyes, the cloudy whiteness, the hunger in them, the way his reflection stayed behind. I stopped shopping at Aldi after that. For months, I avoided it. But one night, driving past, I saw him. The same man, standing in the cart corral, quarter in hand. He was shoving carts together, one after another, eyes still milky white. When the headlights of my car hit him, he looked up, and he smiled. The next morning, I went back in daylight. Carts stacked neatly, no trace of him. But taped to one handle was a note, written in shaky letters. Line still open. Now, every time I pass that store, I glance at the checkout lanes through the windows, and more often than not, I see him there, standing at the end of a grocery line that never seems to end. I worked overnight stocking at Aldi for about 6 months. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Nights are quiet, you don't deal with customers, and you can zone out pushing pallets around under the hum of the lights. If you've ever worked retail, you know the sound of a pallet jack. The wheels clatter against the floor, the metal rattles, and the low hum vibrates in your hands. It's background noise, something you stop noticing after a while. At least I did, until it started to sound like something else. At first, it was subtle. I was unloading produce, dragging a jack across the polished concrete when I realized the vibration wasn't random. The wheels clattered in rhythm. 3 short bumps, a pause, 3 short bumps again. Like music, I thought maybe I was just tired. It was 3 in the morning, the store silent except for the buzzing lights and the wheels of my jack. I shook it off and kept working. But a week later, it happened again, this time clearer. A distinct 3-note pattern, almost like a child humming the same part of a lullaby on repeat. I stopped in the middle of the aisle, listening. The vibration traveled through my palms and up my arms, like the jack itself was humming. Out of instinct, I hummed along under my breath. The moment I did, the notes changed. The wheels vibrated in a new rhythm, halting, deliberate. I knew enough Morse code from my uncle, who was a ham radio guy, to recognize what I was hearing. UBOAT, that's what it spelled. Over and over. I laughed nervously, told myself it was just random bumps on the floor. But the word stuck in my head. In retail, U-boat is slang for the long stocking carts employees push around like scooters. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe my brain was looking for patterns where there weren't any. But I couldn't shake it. The next night, I tested it. I hummed while pushing, and sure enough, the rhythm shifted. This time, the vibrations spelled out a date. January 14th. Then a name. Mallory. I checked the schedule. No one named Mallory worked there. But when I mentioned it casually to the shift lead, his face drained of color. Mallory used to work here, he said quietly. Seasonal hire. Years ago. She got stuck behind a bay door during a storm. Quit after that. I haven't heard her name in forever. The way he said it gave me chills. From then on, I listened every night. The pallet jack would sing different things depending on how I moved it. Sometimes just nonsense, other times clear warnings. One night it hummed, "Stop stacking water on Bay 2." I told the team, half joking. They rolled their eyes, said I was sleep-deprived. But I rearranged the pallets anyway. That same night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Rain hammered the roof. At 3 a.m., a downspout broke loose and water flooded Bay 2. If I hadn't moved the pallets, half the stock would have been ruined. After that, I didn't laugh anymore. I listened. The jack sang names, dates, instructions, always when I was alone. Sometimes the hums stretched into full melodies, low, mournful tones that made the hairs on my neck rise. Other times it was almost cheerful, skipping rhythms that sped up as if urging me forward. But there was always meaning, always something behind it. One night, while stalking the frozen aisle, the humming grew louder than ever. The vibrations thrummed so hard they rattled the boxes on the jack. This time it spelled, "Do not open Freezer 3." I froze. Freezer 3 was right beside me, fogged with frost. The handle glistened under the harsh light. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then, slowly, I yanked the pallet away and forced myself not to look back. The next morning, I asked the morning crew if they'd had issues with Freezer 3. One guy muttered, "Doors sealed weird. Maintenance keeps patching it. Smells off when you open it." I never touched Freezer 3 again. By then, I was half convinced I was losing my mind, but I couldn't stop listening. One shift, the humming built into a frantic staccato, Morse spilling too fast to follow. My palms buzzed painfully as the words spelled out, "Get out, get out, get out." I abandoned the jack and backed down the aisle. Seconds later, a case of wine toppled from the top of the pallet I'd been about to move. Glass shattered across the floor, red pooling like blood. After that, the others noticed me. They saw how I avoided certain aisles, how I refused to move certain pallets. They laughed behind my back, but they also started watching me closely. Because whenever I listened, things didn't go wrong. The manager pulled me aside once, asked me how I always knew. I shrugged, said, "You just get a feel for the floor." He didn't push, but the way he looked at me told me he suspected more. The pallet jack became more than a tool. It was a voice, a warning system, a presence I depended on. And then one night, the melody changed. It wasn't Morse, not exactly. It was music. A hymn, low and soft, vibrating through the handle into my bones. It carried a strange warmth, almost like comfort. I followed it without thinking, pushing the jack like I was being led. It guided me past the aisles, around the stockroom, to the back bay doors. There, in the glow of the exit light, I saw a shape. A young woman, translucent, standing half in shadow. Her uniform was old, outdated. Water dripped from her hair and clothes. She was pushing a U-boat cart. Her lips moved, humming in sync with the vibrations in my palms. When she looked at me, her eyes were hollow but kind. "Thank you," she whispered. The hymn swelled once more, then faded. The jack grew still in my hands. I stood there long after she disappeared, the silence ringing louder than any hum. After that night, the pallet jack never sang again. The wheels squeaked like normal. The hum was gone. But sometimes when a storm rolls over the roof and the lights flicker, I feel it again. Just a faint vibration in my bones, a half-remembered hymn. And in those moments I know she's still there, still pushing carts through the back bays, still singing through the wheels of an old pallet jack. Most people don't think twice about Aldi's double guarantee. If you're not satisfied with an item, they'll replace it and give you your money back. It's one of those simple little policies that makes people loyal to the store. I'd used it a few times, never had a problem. But the guarantee doesn't just promise a refund. Sometimes it promises too much. The first time I noticed something wrong was with a jar of pasta sauce. I'd bought 2 jars one evening after work. One was fine, but the second had a lid that didn't pop when I twisted it. Seal broken. I sighed, set it aside, and told myself I'd return it the next day. Aldi's always good about that kind of thing. The following afternoon, I walked up to customer service with the jar in hand. The clerk didn't even hesitate. She smiled, handed me my refund, and slid a replacement jar across the counter. "Double guarantee," she said cheerfully, like it was a motto. I dropped the jar into my cart, tucked the cash into my wallet, and turned to leave. That's when I saw her. Me. Standing in the wine aisle, half hidden behind a display of Cabernet. Same jacket, same jeans, even the same cart. I froze. My reflection, no, my double, was staring right at me. Her lips moved, shaping words I couldn't hear. Then she pushed her cart quickly down the aisle and disappeared. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I darted over, heart hammering. But when I turned the corner, the aisle was empty. Only one jar of pasta sauce sat neatly on the shelf, identical to the one in my cart. At home, I tried to laugh it off. Stress, lack of sleep, a trick of the mirrors on the freezer doors. But when I unloaded my groceries, there were 2 jars of sauce in my bag. I checked the receipt, only one refund, only one replacement. Yet 2 jars sat on my counter, lids unbroken, labels perfectly aligned. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in Aldi's checkout, conveyor belt running endlessly, jars of sauce sliding past one after another. My hands moved to bag them, but every time I reached for one, another appeared. When I looked down, there were 2 of me bagging side by side, both smiling, both whispering the same word in unison, guarantee. I woke up sweating, my sheets twisted tight. The next morning, I found a receipt taped to my fridge. I hadn't taped it there. It was the same receipt from yesterday, same date, same total, but with a different cashier ID. At the bottom, written in thick black ink, were 3 words: "Welcome back, Lila." My name. The ink was so fresh it smudged when I touched it. I should have stopped then, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. The following week, I returned a dented can of tomatoes. The clerk smiled, processed the refund, and gave me a fresh can. Simple. But as the register screen blinked, I saw something impossible. 2 transactions side by side. 2 versions of me standing at the counter, reaching for the same can. The screen went back to normal. The clerk didn't react. But when the receipt printed, 2 slips came out. One said, "Thank you, Lila." The other said, "Welcome back, Lila." My last name was spelled the way my grandmother used to spell it on birthday cards. Wrong, but familiar. When I got home, there were 2 cans of tomatoes in my bag. I opened one, it was normal. I opened the other. Inside wasn't food, it was paper. A crumpled receipt soaked in tomato juice, the ink smearing but still legible. The date at the top was from 5 years ago. My old address was printed there. And the list of items, bread, milk, sauce, matched a grocery trip I vaguely remembered making. At the bottom was a handwritten note in the same thick black ink. "Please see yourself out." From then on, things spiraled. Some nights I'd shop, and the cashier would greet me like I'd already been through their lane. Other times, a stalker would ask if I wanted another one of those mugs when I'd never bought a mug. Once, while bagging, I looked up at the plexiglass divider. My reflection smiled faintly at me, even though my own face was frozen in fear. I bolted, leaving half my groceries behind. At home, it was worse. Jars of sauce began showing up on my counter when I hadn't bought them. cans stacked neatly in my pantry that I hadn't put there. Receipts tucked under my pillow, folded in half, always with the same words written in ink. Welcome back. I started throwing them out, but every time I did, they came back, sometimes doubled. One night, I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of glass clinking. I stumbled into the kitchen, half asleep, and saw jars sliding across the counter by themselves. Labels peeling, lids rattling. I grabbed one and smashed it on the floor. Red splattered across the tile. Not sauce. Blood, thick, metallic, the smell choking my throat. The shards of glass trembled, sliding back together as the jar reassembled itself. Within seconds, it sat whole again, seal unbroken. I dropped to my knees, shaking. When I looked up at the window over the sink, I saw her again. My double. She stood behind me in the reflection, smiling wide, her hands dripping red as she held another jar. When I spun around, the kitchen was empty. After that, the receipts began appearing in stranger places. One tucked into my coat pocket, another under my windshield wiper. One crammed into the mail slot of my apartment door. All of them had different cashier IDs. All of them were real. And all of them ended with the same words. See you again. I've stopped shopping at Aldi. I can't. But the jars still appear on my counter, in my car, once, horrifyingly, on my desk at work. I don't open them anymore. I can't risk what I'll find inside. But I know the double guarantee doesn't stop. It refunds, it replaces, it repeats. And one day soon, it won't just give me back groceries. It'll give me back myself, a better version. And I don't think she's planning on sharing my life. I've been to Aldi hundreds of times, but I'll never forget the night I saw him in aisle 9. It was late October, one of those nights when the air outside already hinted at winter. I had put off grocery shopping all week, and by the time I made it to the store, it was nearly closing. The parking lot was half empty, just a scattering of cars under the dim yellow lamps. The wind made the cart corral rattle, quarters glinting in the chains. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. Only 2 other shoppers lingered, both hurrying with baskets, and one weary cashier up front. The rest of the place felt abandoned, aisles stretching long and fluorescent into silence. I headed toward the wine section at the back, because Aldi always has cheap bottles. That's when I noticed him. He was tall, too tall, 6.5 feet, maybe more. He stood at the far end of aisle 9, motionless, his back turned. A heavy, outdated coat hung from his shoulders, the kind you'd see in old photographs. His hair was black and slicked back unnaturally, like it had been wet for days and never dried. His skin, from what I could see, was pale. Not just pale, waxen. At first I thought he was a mannequin. Aldi sometimes stacked displays in odd places, but then he shifted his head, just slightly, as though he'd heard me enter. I slowed my cart, wheels squeaking on the polished tile. He turned. His eyes caught the overhead lights, glowing faintly red for a second before dulling again. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared. I looked away, pretending to study a shelf of crackers. My heart thudded in my chest. When I glanced back, he was closer. Not by much, just a step or two, but close enough to know he'd moved while my eyes weren't on him. I left the aisle, quickly. I tried to shake it off. Probably just another shopper, I told myself. Strange lighting, exhaustion. But as I pushed my cart toward the dairy section, I felt it, the heavy pull of being watched, and when I looked back toward aisle 9, he was still there. This time, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. His lips parted too far, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally long, sharp at the edges. My stomach lurched. I abandoned the idea of wine and grabbed the first gallon of milk I could reach. I started for checkout. That was when the lights flickered. The buzzing overhead stopped, the store dropping into an instant of darkness before stuttering back to life. In that heartbeat of black, I swore I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. When the lights flared back, I spun around. No one. The aisle was empty, except for him, now standing at the very end, less than 20 feet away. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking. He tilted his head, studying me like I was an insect under glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, smooth, carrying an accent I couldn't place. "You shouldn't be here." I swallowed hard. "Do you work here?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "I've been here a very long time." I backed toward the registers. My shoes squeaked on the floor, far too loud in the silence. The cashier gave me a nervous smile as I dumped the milk on the belt. She scanned it, hands trembling slightly. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, but when I glanced back at the aisles, he was there again, standing just beyond the end cap, watching. I paid in cash, hands fumbling with the bills. When I looked up, the man was gone. I bolted through the sliding doors, the night air cold and sharp against my skin. I didn't breathe until I was in my car with the doors locked. But even then, as I pulled out of the lot, I saw him, standing by the cart corral, still smiling. His eyes glinted red in the headlights before he melted back into the shadows. For days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a tall, creepy guy. Maybe exhaustion made me see things wrong. But a week later, I went back to Aldi. This time, I told myself I'd prove it was nothing, that I'd walk through aisle 9 and see it empty, like it should be. The store was busier, but the air still felt wrong, heavy. I pushed my cart straight toward the wine section. At first, relief washed over me. The aisle was empty. No tall man, no red eyes, just bottles lined neatly under the hum of the lights. Then the bulb above me popped. The aisle plunged into shadow, one harsh spotlight of fluorescent light still glowing at the far end. And there he was, standing in that pool of light, closer than before. The reflection in the freezer doors across from the aisle showed the bottles, the shelves, the glow of the lights. But not him. Where he stood, the reflection was empty. I staggered back, my cart crashing into a display. Bottles rattled and nearly toppled. The man stepped forward, smiling wider now. His teeth glinted. "You look alive," he said softly, almost to himself. "So warm." The smell hit me then, metallic, like rusted iron. I ran, didn't think, didn't stop, just ran, leaving the cart behind. The cashier shouted after me, but I didn't look back. I made it to my car, slammed the door, locked it. My chest heaved as I fumbled the keys. When the engine roared to life, I looked up. He was standing directly in front of my car. His coat hung heavy on his shoulders, his face pale and sharp under the parking lot lights. His eyes glowed faintly red, and his smile stretched far too wide. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. I don't shop at that Aldi anymore. But a month later, the news reported a man found dead in that same parking lot. The article didn't mention details, but a rumor spread. 2 puncture marks on his neck, skin drained pale. No one wanted to say the word. But I knew. Every time I drive past that store, I glance at the windows. And more often than not, I see him, still standing in aisle 9. Still watching. And I know he's waiting, not for anyone. For me. I used to work deliveries for Aldi. It was never meant to be a career, just a job to cover rent while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. You show up after dark, back the truck into the bay, unload pallets of frozen pizzas and cereal, and push them onto the floor for stockers to shelve before opening. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Most nights were uneventful. You got used to the sounds, the hum of the fluorescents, the squeak of pallet jacks, the dull hum of the freezer fans that never stopped running. But sometimes silence holds something else. There's one night that ended my job, one night that still claws at my memory whenever I hear the rumble of a freezer. It was in January, dead of winter. Snow had been falling since dusk, and by the time I rolled the truck into the loading dock, the parking lot was buried in slush. The sky hung low and heavy, clouds swollen with more snow. Inside, the store felt warmer than usual, but not in a good way. The air was thick, almost damp, and carried a faint smell of metal, like old pennies. The crew that night was small, just me, 2 stockers and the shift lead, a guy named Seth who had been there for years. He was one of those lifers who knew the store better than he knew his own home. We started unloading as usual. Boxes thumped onto the floor, wheels squeaked against tile, the normal rhythm of night work. But about 20 minutes in, I heard something. Scratching. Not the normal squeal of wheels, not the hiss of the compressor. A deep, deliberate scrape, like claws dragging across metal. It was coming from the freezer section. I stopped pushing my pallet and listened. The others kept working, laughing about something, but I couldn't focus. The noise continued, steady and slow, running along the freezer doors. "Hey," I called out. "You guys hear that?" One of the stalkers glanced up, annoyed. "Hear what?" "That scratching. Like claws." They rolled their eyes. "Fans, man. The whole back wall hums and rattles. You'll get used to it." But I knew the sound of machinery. This wasn't it. As the night went on, the noise followed us. Every time I wheeled past the freezer aisle, the scratching grew louder. Sometimes it was joined by a low rumble, almost too deep to hear, more felt than heard. By 1 a.m., the storm outside was howling. The roof groaned under the weight of snow. And then, clear as day, I heard it, a howl. It wasn't the wind, not muffled, not distant. It came from inside the store. The stalkers froze. Seth cursed under his breath, grabbed his flashlight and stomped toward the back. "Probably some stray dog," he muttered. "Got in the dock. I'll chase it out." But when he opened the freezer door, the smell hit us. Wet fur. Blood. I gagged, covering my nose. The cold air pouring out wasn't normal either. It was sharp, biting, like it cut through my lungs. Seth shined the flashlight into the rows of frozen shelves. Boxes of pizza, bags of vegetables, cartons of ice cream. All normal. Then the beam caught something. Eyes, glowing yellow, deep in the mist. The light flicked off the reflection, and a massive shape shifted behind the fogged glass. The scratching grew louder. Claws gouged deep lines down the steel frame of the door. Seth slammed it shut and locked it, face pale. "That's not a dog," one stalker whispered. We all knew it wasn't. The howling rose again, rattling through the aisles. This time, it carried hunger. The lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs overhead buzzed, popped, and died. The store dimmed until only a few harsh strips lit the aisles, leaving long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then we heard it, metal bending. A freezer door creaked open on its own. Mist poured out, rolling low across the tile. Something stepped into it, a shape too large for any human. The stalkers armed themselves with box cutters, the only weapons we had. Seth clutched his heavy flashlight like a club. I grabbed a broom, my hands slick with sweat. The fog parted, and it emerged. 7 feet tall, hunched, its body thick with muscle under ragged fur. Claws gleamed wet in the fluorescent light. Its snout dripped saliva onto the floor, steaming in the cold mist. And its eyes, God help me, its eyes weren't animal. They were human. It growled, and the sound vibrated through my bones. None of us moved. Then it lunged. Seth swung the flashlight, smashing it against the beast's head. The bulb shattered, sparks flying, but the creature barely flinched. With one swipe, it shredded through metal shelving like paper. We scattered. One stalker bolted toward the produce section. The beast pounced, faster than it had any right to be, and in 2 strides it was on him. His scream cut through the store, then choked into silence as blood sprayed across the freezer doors. I dove behind a pallet of cereal, trembling. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would give me away. The other stalker yelled from the bakery aisle, trying to draw it off. "Over here! Hey!" The beast turned, ears twitching, and sprinted after him. He swung a box cutter uselessly, slashing at its arm. The creature howled, more annoyed than hurt, then pinned him with one massive claw. His scream ended in a wet crunch. I bit my hand to stop myself from crying out. When I dared to look again, Seth was the only one left standing. He ran toward checkout, flashlight in hand, shouting, "Come on, you bastard." The creature obliged. It tore through displays, claws raking wood and cardboard, eyes locked on him. He tried to leap over the bagging counter, but the beast was faster. It tackled him, driving him hard into the floor. I'll never forget the sound of teeth sinking into his throat. Blood pooled across the tile as the growling shifted into something wetter, hungrier. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, the store was silent. The fog still clung to the aisles, curling around toppled displays. Blood dripped steadily from freezer handles. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours. My legs ached, my teeth chattered, but I didn't move. Then I heard footsteps, slow, uneven. I peeked around the pallet. Seth stood there, or what was left of him. His shirt was torn, soaked in blood. His skin looked gray, stretched tight, and his eyes glowed faint yellow. His jaw hung strangely, teeth too sharp, too long. He sniffed the air, tilting his head toward me. For a moment, our eyes locked. Then he stumbled back toward the freezer, vanishing into the mist. That was when I understood. The bite wasn't death. It was transformation. I bolted for the dock, slipping on blood, shoving the door open with my shoulder. Snow blasted my face, freezing my lungs. I didn't stop running until the store lights were distant, swallowed by the storm. I never went back. News reports later called it a gas explosion that destroyed part of the store. A lie? I know what I saw. Sometimes, when I drive past another Aldi late at night, I look at the freezers. and if the moon is full, I see the frost shift. I hear the faint scrape of claws, and once I swear I saw eyes glowing yellow through the glass. I don't shop there anymore. I don't go near them, because I know what's waiting behind those freezers. And I know one night when the doors creak open, it'll step out again. Hungry, hunting.